Emma didn't know that the man she was about to approach at the upscale cafe was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories. She didn't know that he'd been searching for his mate for over a century, and she certainly didn't know that her desperate plea for a fake date would bind her fate to his forever. But right now, sitting in the corner of Meridian's most expensive cafe with her ex-fiancé's wedding invitation mocking her from the marble table, Emma knew only one thing. She was running out of time and options. 3 days. That's all she had left before she'd have to walk into David's wedding and watch him marry Sarah, her former best friend, her former maid of honour, the woman who'd smiled to Emma's face while stealing her fiancé behind her back. The invitation lay open beside her untouched latte, the elegant script a cruel reminder that she'd already RSVP'd +1 back when she and David were still together, back when she'd foolishly believed their 3-year relationship meant something. Her phone buzzed with another text from her sister Claire. "Can't wait to see who you're bringing tomorrow. Mum's been telling everyone you have a mysterious new boyfriend. Please tell me you're not planning to show up alone and embarrass the family again." Emma's stomach twisted. She'd been so desperate to save face after David's public humiliation, announcing his engagement to Sarah on social media while Emma was still living in their shared apartment, that she'd lied, told everyone she was dating someone new, someone wonderful, someone who actually wanted her. The lies had snowballed. Every family dinner, every phone call, every casual conversation had added another layer to her fictional relationship. And now, with the wedding looming, she either had to confess the truth and face the pitying looks, or somehow materialize a convincing boyfriend in the next 72 hours. Her dating app attempts had been disasters. The 3 men who'd actually agreed to meet her had taken one look at her desperate proposal, offering to pay for a fake date, and either laughed in her face or backed away like she was contagious. The last one had actually said, "Lady, I'm not that desperate for money." But Emma was that desperate. She scanned the cafe again, her heart hammering against her ribs. Most of the men here were either clearly on dates, working on laptops, or had already given her discouraging looks when she'd made eye contact. Her hands shook as she picked up her phone to scroll through the dating apps one more time. Maybe someone new had, "Excuse me, miss, I couldn't help but notice you seemed distressed." The voice was like dark honey and aged whiskey, rich and smooth with an underlying edge that made something low in Emma's belly flutter unexpectedly. She looked up to find the most devastatingly handsome man she'd ever seen standing beside her table. Tall didn't begin to describe him. He had to be at least 6'4", with broad shoulders that filled out his clearly expensive charcoal suit. His hair was dark as midnight, styled perfectly, and his eyes, God, his eyes. They were amber, almost golden, and when they focused on her, Emma felt like he could see straight through to her soul. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, and there was something about the way he carried himself that screamed both danger and safety in equal measure. Everything about him was intimidating, from his perfect posture to the way other cafe patrons seemed to unconsciously give him space. Even the barista behind the counter kept glancing his way with obvious nervousness. Emma started, then stopped. She'd been about to brush him off, to tell him she was fine, but something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't looking at her with pity or amusement. His gaze was intense, focused, like she was the only person in the room that mattered. "I'm sorry, I don't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Emma nodded before she could think better of it. He moved with fluid grace, like a predator who knew exactly where he belonged in the food chain. When he sat down, his presence seemed to fill the entire space. She noticed his hands, large, strong, with calluses that suggested he wasn't just another businessman despite the expensive suit. "You looked like you were about to approach someone," he observed, his voice carefully neutral. "But you seem hesitant. Is there something I can help with?" Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. Had he been watching her pathetic attempts to find a date? "It's nothing, just personal problems." His eyes never left her face. Sometimes talking to a stranger helps. There was something about his tone, gentle but commanding, that made Emma want to tell him everything, which was insane. She didn't even know his name. But sitting there, looking into those impossible amber eyes, she felt safer than she had in months. "This is going to sound completely crazy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Try me." Emma took a shaky breath. "I need a date to my ex-fiancé's wedding in 3 days, and I know how that sounds, but I'm not. I can pay you. I just need someone to pretend to be my boyfriend for one night so I don't show up alone and let everyone see what a complete failure I am." The words tumbled out in a rush, and Emma immediately wanted to disappear under the table. She just propositioned a complete stranger, a stranger who probably thought she was unhinged. But instead of laughing or making excuses to leave, he leaned back in his chair, those golden eyes studying her with newfound intensity. Something shifted in his expression, a recognition that Emma couldn't quite interpret. "Your ex-fiancé," he said carefully, "the one you're trying to impress. He hurt you." It wasn't a question. Something in Emma's chest twisted at the understanding in his voice. "It doesn't matter. I just need to get through this wedding without completely humiliating myself." "What kind of man would you need me to pretend to be?" The question caught Emma off guard. She'd expected him to refuse, not ask for details. "Someone impressive, confident, the kind of man who would make everyone wonder what he sees in me." Her voice cracked on the last words, revealing more than she'd intended. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And what makes you think any man worthy of you would need to pretend?" Before Emma could process that loaded question, he was reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. The cardstock was heavy, expensive, with just 2 lines, Adrian Blackwood and a phone number. "I'll do it," he said simply. Emma stared at the card, hardly daring to believe. "You will? Just like that?" "With one condition." Adrian Blackwood leaned forward, his voice dropping to something that made Emma's pulse race. "I don't do fake anything. If I'm going to this wedding with you, I'm going as your husband." The word hit Emma like a physical force. "My what?" "Boyfriend suggests temporary, casual. If you want to impress these people, if you want to show your ex what he lost, you need someone who claims you completely." Adrian's eyes held hers captive. "Husbands are permanent, possessive, the kind of man who would never let you go." Emma's mouth went dry. The way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, made something dangerous flutter in her chest. "But we just met. We don't know anything about each other." "We have 3 days to learn." Adrian stood, moving with that same predatory grace. "Think about it, Emma." She startled. "How do you know my name?" He gestured to her coffee cup, where she'd written her name for pickup. But something in his small smile suggested that wasn't the only reason. "I'll be in touch." Adrian turned to leave, and Emma watched in growing confusion as every person in the cafe suddenly found somewhere else to look. The barista ducked behind the espresso machine. A businessman at a nearby table quickly gathered his papers and left. Even the elderly woman by the window seemed to shrink into her seat. "Wait," Emma called after him. "What do you do? For work, I mean." Adrian paused at the door, looking back at her with those impossible amber eyes. "I'm in security." And then he was gone, leaving Emma alone with a business card and the strangest feeling that her entire life had just changed in ways she couldn't begin to understand. She looked down at the card again. Adrian Blackwood. The name felt important somehow, like she should recognize it. Around her, the cafe slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming in hushed tones, but Emma could swear she heard someone whisper, "Was that really him?" Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Wear something blue to the wedding. It brings out your eyes." Emma's breath caught. How had he gotten her number? How did he know what colour her eyes were? They were just ordinary brown, nothing special. But as she looked at her reflection in the cafe window, She could swear there were flecks of gold she'd never noticed before. She clutched the business card tighter, wondering what she'd just gotten herself into. 3 days to create a believable relationship with a stranger who made her feel both terrified and incredibly safe. 3 days to convince everyone, including herself, that someone like Adrian Blackwood could actually want someone like her. Emma didn't know it yet, but she'd just agreed to marry the Alpha King, and he'd been waiting for her his entire life. Adrian Blackwood had called exactly 24 hours later, his voice as dark and commanding over the phone as it had been in person. "I'll pick you up at 10. We have shopping to do." Now Emma stood outside the most exclusive boutique in the city, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as Adrian spoke quietly with the manager. Even from the sidewalk, she could see the woman's deferential posture, the way she nodded rapidly at whatever Adrian was saying. When he gestured toward Emma, the manager's eyes widened with something that looked almost like fear. "What did you tell her?" Emma asked when Adrian emerged to collect her. "That you're important to me," he said simply, but his hand settled on the small of her back with a possessiveness that made her breath catch. "That's all that matters." The boutique was the kind of place Emma had only dreamed of entering. Silk gowns hung like art pieces, their price tags carefully hidden, but undoubtedly astronomical. The manager, Vivian, she'd introduced herself with a trembling smile, had already pulled several options in Emma's size. "For a wedding, you said?" Vivian's French accent was refined, but her hands shook slightly as she hung the first dress. "Something that makes a statement?" Adrian settled into a leather chair positioned to view the changing room area. "Something that shows everyone exactly what they missed." Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. "Adrian, you don't have to—" "Try the blue one first," he said, cutting her off gently. His amber eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Trust me." The dress was stunning, midnight blue silk that hugged her curves and fell in an elegant drape to her ankles. When Emma stepped out of the changing room, Adrian went completely still. The air between them seemed to thicken, and something golden flickered in his gaze. "That one," he said, his voice rougher than before. "But there are others." "That one." The command in his tone brooked no argument. To Vivian, he added, "Shoes, jewellery, whatever she needs, put it all on my account." Emma's protest died in her throat when she saw him produce a black card that made Vivian's eyes go wide. Not just any black card, one that Emma had heard whispered about but never seen, the kind of card that had no spending limit because the bank assumed you could afford anything. "Adrian, this is too much. It's not nearly enough." He stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace. When his fingers brushed hers, that strange warmth shot up her arm again, settling in her chest like a second heartbeat. "Let me do this for you, Emma, please." There was something in his voice, almost vulnerable, that made her nod. As Vivian bustled around gathering accessories, Adrian stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the small space. "Tell me about him," he said quietly. "Your ex." Emma's hand moved unconsciously to her ribs, where a faint scar hid beneath the silk dress. "David? He's charming, successful. Everyone loves him." "That's not what I asked." Adrian's eyes tracked the movement of her hand. "What did he do to you?" The question was asked so gently, but with an underlying steel that made Emma feel safe enough to answer. "He never hit me, if that's what you're thinking. He was just cruel, with words, with silences. He had a way of making me feel grateful that he stayed, even when staying meant tearing me down piece by piece." Something dangerous flickered across Adrian's features. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and for a moment the air in the boutique felt heavy with barely contained power. "He threw a glass once," Emma continued, her voice barely a whisper. "When I questioned why he was working late every night, I didn't know about Sarah then. It shattered against the wall behind me, and a piece—" She touched her ribs again. Adrian's jaw tightened to the point of pain. "His name is David what?" Morrison, but Adrian, you can't—" "I can't what?" His voice was deceptively soft, but Emma caught the lethal edge underneath. "Whatever you're thinking, just don't. David's not worth it. And besides, tomorrow night is about moving forward, not revenge." Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Tomorrow is about showing everyone who you really are. Not his victim, not someone who settles for less. You're—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "You're extraordinary, Emma, even if you don't see it yet." Before Emma could respond to that loaded statement, Vivian returned with jewellery that probably cost more than Emma's annual rent. As the woman fussed with necklaces and earrings, Adrian retreated to his chair, but his gaze never left Emma's reflection in the mirror. "So," Emma said, desperate to break the tension, "what's our story? How did we meet? How long have we been together?" "Childhood friends," Adrian said without hesitation. "We lost touch when my family moved away for business. Reconnected 6 months ago through mutual friends." "Childhood friends," Emma repeated. "That's actually perfect. It explains why no one's met you before." "And the engagement?" Emma's hands stilled on the necklace Vivian was fastening. "Engagement? If I'm going as your husband, we need to be engaged, unless you prefer a quick courthouse wedding story." The casual way he discussed their fake relationship made Emma's pulse race. "Engagement is fine. Recent?" "Last week, still adjusting to the ring." Adrian's smile was predatory. "You're still deciding on the wedding date because you want everything perfect." "Right, perfect." Emma's reflection stared back at her, transformed by the expensive dress and jewellery into someone she barely recognised, someone who looked like she could actually be with a man like Adrian Blackwood. They were walking to his car, a sleek black vehicle that cost more than Emma's apartment, when her curiosity finally overcame her nervousness. "Adrian, what do you really do? I mean, security is pretty vague." He paused with his hand on the passenger door handle. Around them, the busy street continued its rhythm, but Emma noticed how people seemed to give Adrian's car a wide berth without even realising it. "I manage territories," he said finally. "Businesses, people who work for my family." "Like a CEO." "Something like that." Adrian opened her door, his body creating a shield between her and the street. "Does it matter?" Emma slid into the passenger seat, surrounded by leather and luxury. "I guess not. I just feel like I should know something real about the man I'm supposedly going to marry." Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he started the engine. "What would you like to know?" "Anything, everything. Your favourite colour, where you grew up, if you have family." "Blue," he said immediately. "Like the dress you're wearing. I grew up in the mountains north of here, and I have a very large family, though most people would call them employees." Something in his tone suggested there was more to that story, but Emma didn't push. Instead, she found herself studying his profile as he navigated traffic. The sharp line of his jaw, the way his hair caught the afternoon light, the careful control in every movement. "My turn," Adrian said. "What's your favourite time of day?" "Dawn, just before the sun comes up, when everything's quiet and full of possibility." "Mine too." His voice was softer now, almost wondering. "I've always been an early riser. Something about that moment when the world shifts from night to day." The conversation flowed easier after that. Favourite books. Emma loved romance novels. Adrian preferred historical non-fiction, but admitted to a weakness for mythology. Favourite foods. Emma was addicted to coffee shop pastries. Adrian cooked surprisingly well for a man who could afford private chefs. Favourite music. They both loved classical, though Emma's playlist was also filled with pop songs she was embarrassed to admit. By the time Adrian pulled into the parking lot of an upscale restaurant, Emma realised she was genuinely enjoying herself. When had she last had a conversation this easy, this natural? "One more thing," Adrian said as he came around to open her door. "At dinner, the server might recognise me. People in this city know my family name. Don't be surprised if we get special treatment." "Special treatment how?" Adrian's smile held secrets. You'll see. The restaurant was elegant and dimly lit, the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance. But when Adrian gave his name to the hostess, her face went pale. "Mr. Blackwood," she stammered. "Of course, right this way. Your usual table?" They were led to a private corner booth with a view of the city lights. Emma noticed how other diners glanced their way, whispers following in their wake. The server who approached their table actually bowed slightly. "Good evening, your—" The young man caught himself, glancing nervously at Emma. "Mr. Blackwood, what can I prepare for you tonight?" "Your Majesty?" Emma repeated when the server left to get wine. "Did he almost call you Your Majesty?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Emma, who are you really?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "And don't say security. People don't bow to security consultants." For a long moment Adrian said nothing. Then he leaned back in the booth, his amber eyes studying her face. "What I'm about to tell you might sound impossible. Try me. There are things in this world that most humans don't know about. Older things, supernatural things." Adrian's voice was careful, measured. "Shapeshifters, for instance, wolves who can take human form. They organize into packs, like wolf families, with alphas who lead and protect." Emma's heart began to race, but not with fear, with recognition. Shapeshifters. The Northern Territories, everything from here to the Canadian border. That's my family's territory. Has been for over 2 centuries. Adrian's eyes never left hers. "I'm what you might call the Alpha King, the leader of all the packs in the region." The words hung in the air between them. Emma stared at him, taking in the predatory grace she'd noticed, the way people reacted to him, the golden flicker in his eyes when he was angry or intense. "You're telling me you're a werewolf," she said slowly. "I prefer shapeshifter, and yes." Emma reached for her wineglass with trembling fingers. "Prove it." Adrian glanced around the restaurant, then leaned forward. His eyes began to glow, not metaphorically, but literally, shifting from amber to pure gold. His canines extended slightly, and when he smiled, Emma saw fangs. "Convinced?" he asked softly. The logical part of Emma's mind screamed that she should run, should call this whole thing off, should get as far away from Adrian Blackwood as possible. But looking into those golden eyes, feeling that strange warmth in her chest grow stronger, Emma found herself nodding. "Strangely, yes." She took a large gulp of wine. "So when you said you'd go as my husband—" "I meant it. In my world, mates are sacred bonds. When 2 people are meant for each other, they can sense it." Adrian's hand moved across the table, his fingers brushing hers. The moment they touched, golden warmth shot up Emma's arm, and she gasped. "Do you feel that?" "What is it?" "Recognition," Adrian said simply. "The bond calling to its match." Emma's breath caught. "You're saying we're mates? Like destined?" "I'm saying that what I felt the moment I caught your scent in that cafe, what you're feeling now when I touch you, that's not fake. That's not something I can pretend." Adrian's fingers threaded through hers, and the warmth spread through Emma's entire body. "So when I go to this wedding with you tomorrow night, when I call you my wife, when I claim you in front of everyone who ever made you feel less than, it won't be an act." Emma stared at him, her mind reeling. "But you barely know me." "I know you're brave enough to approach strangers when you're desperate. I know you'd rather face humiliation than admit defeat. I know someone hurt you badly, but you're still willing to trust again." Adrian's thumb traced circles on her hand, sending shivers up her arm. "I know you taste like coffee and hope, and that your eyes have gold flecks that shine when you're nervous. Adrian, I know this is overwhelming. I know it sounds impossible. But Emma, I've been waiting for you for over a century. If you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my very long life proving that you're worth waiting for." The server chose that moment to return with their meals, and Emma was grateful for the interruption. Her head was spinning with revelations, shapeshifters, mates, bond recognition. But underneath the shock, something in her chest was singing with rightness. "What happens after tomorrow night?" she asked quietly as they ate. "That's up to you," Adrian said. "The bond exists whether you accept it or not. But I won't force anything. If you want me to disappear after the wedding, I will. If you want to explore this, whatever this is, I'll be here." Emma looked down at their joined hands, at the way her fingers seemed to fit perfectly between his. "And if I'm not ready? If this is all too much?" Adrian's smile was gentle, patient. "Then I wait. However long it takes, Emma. I've waited this long. I can wait longer." That patience, that absolute certainty combined with total respect for her choice made something crack open in Emma's chest. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of conversation and glances loaded with possibility. When Adrian walked her to her apartment door, Emma found herself reluctant for the evening to end. "Tomorrow night," she said, her hand on the doorknob. "Tomorrow night," Adrian agreed. He leaned down, and for a moment Emma thought he might kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips softly to her forehead. "Sleep well, Emma. Dream of me." As his footsteps faded down the hallway, Emma touched the spot where his lips had been. Her entire body still hummed with that golden warmth, and she had the strangest feeling that she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into something that would change everything. Through her window she watched Adrian's car disappear into the night. Tomorrow she would walk into David's wedding on the arm of the Alpha King, and everyone who had ever made her feel small would see exactly what they had missed. But more than that, Emma was beginning to suspect that she might actually be falling for the man who claimed she was his destiny. And the most terrifying part was that it didn't feel fake at all. It felt like coming home. The rehearsal dinner invitation arrived the next morning, slipped under Emma's apartment door like a golden threat. Elegant script on cream cardstock informed her that David and Sarah would be honoured by her presence at the pre-wedding festivities. The kind of polite, formal language that barely concealed the underlying message. "We want to see you suffer one more time." Emma stared at the invitation over her morning coffee, her stomach churning. She hadn't planned on attending the rehearsal dinner. The wedding itself would be torture enough. But something about the phrasing, the deliberate formality, made her suspect this wasn't really optional. Her phone rang, and Adrian's name flashed on the screen. Just seeing it there made that strange warmth bloom in her chest. "Good morning?" His voice was like dark honey, even through the phone. "Morning," Emma managed. "I got another invitation to tonight's rehearsal dinner." Silence stretched for a moment. When Adrian spoke again, his tone held an edge she was beginning to recognise. "They're escalating." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Why invite you to an intimate family dinner when you're already coming to the wedding? They want an audience for whatever they have planned." Adrian's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. "They want to humiliate you in front of the people who matter most to them." Emma's grip tightened on the phone. "So what do? We go, but we go prepared." There was steel in Adrian's voice now, the tone of someone accustomed to command. "I'll pick you up at 6. Wear the dress from yesterday." "Adrian, I don't think—" "Emma." Her name on his lips was both gentle and commanding. "Trust me, whatever they have planned, they're not prepared for what I'm bringing." The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at her phone with a mixture of anticipation and terror. Part of her wanted to call him back, to cancel everything, to hide in her apartment until David and Sarah's wedding was just another memory. But a larger part of her, the part that had felt more alive in the past 2 days than she had in 3 years with David, wanted to see exactly what the Alpha King had planned. Her doorbell rang just after 5:30, and Emma's breath caught when she opened it. Adrian stood in the hallway wearing a midnight blue suit that emphasised his impossible height and broad shoulders. But it wasn't the expensive clothing that made her pulse race. It was the way his amber eyes darkened when they swept over her dress. "Perfect," he murmured, stepping closer. "You look perfect." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's the same dress from yesterday." "It's not the dress." Adrian's hand cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. It's the woman wearing it. The golden warmth that had become familiar over the past day flared to life at his touch. Emma found herself leaning into his palm, her eyes fluttering closed. When she opened them again, Adrian's gaze was intense, almost possessive. "Before we go," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. Tonight won't be like yesterday. The people at this dinner, some of them will recognize what I am. Not human, I mean. Others will just sense that I'm dangerous. Either way, they'll treat you differently." "Differently how?" "Like you matter. Like you're someone worth their respect." Adrian's hand slid down to rest at the base of her throat, right over her pulse point. "It might be overwhelming." Emma covered his hand with hers. "Will you be there?" "I'll be right beside you, always." The promise in his voice made something settle in Emma's chest, something that felt like coming home. "Ready?" The drive to the restaurant was quieter than usual. Adrian's hand rested on Emma's thigh, his thumb tracing absent patterns that sent shivers up her spine. She found herself studying his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the way his hair caught the setting sun. "Adrian, what you said yesterday about mates and bonds, is it always this intense?" His fingers stilled for a moment. No, most wolves spend years getting to know their mates, building the connection gradually. What we have... He glanced at her, those amber eyes holding secrets. "What we have is rare, immediate recognition, complete bond formation." "And that means what exactly?" "It means that every instinct I have is screaming at me to claim you, to mark you as mine so thoroughly that no one could ever question your worth again." Adrian's voice roughened. "It means that the idea of anyone hurting you makes me want to tear them apart, and it means that if you asked me to, I would burn down the world to keep you safe." Emma's breath caught. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made it somehow more terrifying and thrilling. "That's a lot. Too much?" "I don't know yet," Emma admitted, "but I'm willing to find out." Adrian's smile was predatory. "Good, because we're here." The restaurant was smaller than last night's, but infinitely more exclusive. Emma recognised it from magazine articles, the kind of place where celebrities proposed and politicians made deals. Valet attendants appeared immediately when Adrian's car pulled up, and Emma noticed how they wouldn't quite meet his eyes. "Remember?" Adrian murmured as they walked toward the entrance. "You belong here. You belong with me. Don't let anyone make you forget that." His hand settled on the small of her back, and Emma felt power radiating from him like heat. Other patrons in the lobby seemed to instinctively step aside, creating a clear path to the hostess station. "Mr. Blackwood," the hostess said, her voice carefully professional despite the nervous tremor. "Your party is already seated. Right this way." They were led through the main dining room to a private area where David and Sarah's families had gathered. Emma recognised most of the faces, David's parents, who had always treated her like a disappointing substitute for the daughter-in-law they really wanted. Sarah's sister Melissa, who had never bothered to hide her disdain, various aunts, uncles and family friends who would all be watching tomorrow to see her humiliation. The conversation died when they appeared in the doorway. David stood near the bar, his face cycling through surprise, confusion, and something that might have been fear as his gaze moved from Emma to the imposing man beside her. Sarah, radiant in a cream-coloured dress that probably cost more than Emma's monthly rent, went pale when she saw them. "Emma?" David said, his voice too loud in the sudden quiet. "You came." "Wouldn't miss it," Emma replied, proud that her voice stayed steady. "David, Sarah, I'd like you to meet my fiancé, Adrian Blackwood." The lie rolled off her tongue easier than she'd expected. Adrian stepped forward, his presence filling the space, and Emma watched David's confident smile falter. Next to Adrian's commanding height and obvious strength, David looked smaller somehow, less significant. "Fiancé?" Sarah's voice was sharp with disbelief. "But Emma, you never mentioned—" It's recent, Adrian said smoothly, extending his hand toward David. I can see why Emma was hesitant to bring me around before now. She wanted to be sure. David took Adrian's hand automatically, and Emma saw him wince at the grip. When Adrian released him, David flexed his fingers like he was checking for damage. Blackwood, David repeated, his lawyer instincts clearly trying to place the name. Are you in business here in the city? I manage several territories, Adrian replied, the same vague answer he'd given Emma. Family enterprises. Around them, the older guests were starting to whisper. Emma caught fragments of conversation. Blackwood family, Northern Territories, billions, and realised that Adrian's name carried weight in circles she'd never moved in. Sarah's mother appeared at their side with the kind of aggressive friendliness that masked deep calculation. Mr. Blackwood, what a pleasure. I don't believe I've seen you at any of our usual events. I prefer to keep a lower profile, Adrian said, his arms sliding around Emma's waist in a gesture that looked casual but felt possessive. Though Emma has convinced me to be more social. Emma felt eyes on them from every direction. David's parents were staring with barely concealed shock. Melissa had actually dropped her cocktail. Even the servers seemed to be giving their table extra attention. How long have you two been together? David asked, his tone carefully casual. 6 months, Emma and Adrian said simultaneously. They'd practiced this in the car. 6 months, David repeated, and you're already engaged? When you know, Adrian replied, his fingers tightening on Emma's waist. I'm not the kind of man who wastes time once I've found what I want. The implied criticism of David's 3-year relationship with Emma hung in the air. Sarah stepped closer to David, her arm linking through his in a gesture that looked more defensive than affectionate. Well, she said, her smile brittle, how romantic. A whirlwind courtship. Something like that, Adrian agreed. He looked down at Emma with an expression that made her breath catch. Though I'd say it was more like inevitability. From the moment I saw her, I knew she was meant to be mine. The way he said it, the absolute certainty in his voice, made Emma's pulse race. Around them, she could see the other guests processing this development. Emma Walsh, quiet little Emma who they'd all written off, was engaged to a man who commanded attention just by breathing. David's phone buzzed, and he glanced down at it with a frown. Excuse me for a moment. Work call. As he stepped away, Sarah moved closer to Emma, her voice dropping to a whisper. Really, Emma? An escort? I mean, I understand you're desperate, but... Careful. Adrian's voice was soft, but it carried an undertone that made Sarah step back instinctively. I don't like hearing my fiancé insulted. I just meant, Sarah stammered, clearly unprepared for Adrian's intervention. You meant to hurt her, to make her feel small. Adrian's amber eyes held Sarah captive, and Emma saw the other woman's face go pale. That stops now. Adrian, Emma said quietly, touching his arm. The moment her fingers made contact, some of the predatory tension left his posture. You're right, he murmured, covering her hand with his. Tonight is about celebration, not confrontation. But the damage was already done. Word of the exchange spread through the small gathering like wildfire. Emma found herself surrounded by people who had barely acknowledged her existence when she was with David, all of them suddenly eager to congratulate her and get to know her mysterious fiancé. 6 months, David's mother said, appearing at Emma's elbow with poorly concealed curiosity. How did you meet? Childhood friends, Emma replied automatically. We reconnected through mutual acquaintances. How lovely. And your family, Mr. Blackwood, are they local? Adrian's smile was polite but revealed nothing. Some are, others prefer more remote locations. Emma noticed how he deflected personal questions without seeming rude, how he managed to imply wealth and status without actually claiming anything specific. But she also noticed how the servers kept glancing at him nervously, how conversations quieted when he passed. During dinner, David returned to the table, his expression tight with whatever he'd learned from his phone call. He kept shooting glances at Adrian, and Emma caught him Googling something on his phone when he thought no one was looking. "So, Adrian," David said as the main course arrived, "Emma mentioned your insecurity. What kind of security exactly?" "The comprehensive kind," Adrian replied smoothly. "Territory management, dispute resolution, protection services for high-value clients." "Sounds lucrative. It has its rewards." Adrian's gaze moved to Emma, warm and possessive. "Though lately I've found my priorities shifting toward more personal investments." Emma felt heat bloom in her cheeks at the implication. Around the table, she could see David's family processing the obvious wealth, the casual confidence, the way Adrian looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Investment banking, then?" David pressed, clearly fishing for information. "Something like that." Adrian's tone suggested the topic was closed. "What about you, David? Emma mentioned you're an attorney." The conversation shifted, and Emma found herself relaxing slightly, until David's phone rang again, and this time his face went white when he looked at the screen. "Excuse me," he muttered, stepping away from the table again. "Popular man," Adrian observed mildly, but Emma caught the edge in his voice. Sarah was watching her fiancé with growing confusion. "I don't know who keeps calling him. He's been getting these urgent calls all day." Adrian's hand found Emma's under the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. The golden warmth flared again, stronger than before, and Emma had the strangest sensation that Adrian knew exactly who was calling David. When David returned, his confident lawyer facade had cracked completely. He looked pale, shaken, like he'd received devastating news. "Everything all right?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern. "Fine," David said quickly. "Just work issues, nothing that can't wait until after the wedding." But Emma noticed how his hands trembled slightly as he reached for his wine, how he kept glancing at Adrian like he was seeing him in a new light. Whatever those phone calls had been about, they'd changed everything. "Well," Sarah's mother said, clearly trying to salvage the evening's mood, "I think this calls for a toast to David and Sarah and to Emma and her wonderful surprise engagement." Glasses were raised around the table, but Emma caught the undercurrents of tension. The way David couldn't quite meet Adrian's eyes, the nervous energy that had replaced the earlier smugness. As they prepared to leave, David approached them at the coat check. "Emma, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Adrian's entire body went rigid. "I don't think—" "It's okay," Emma said quietly, though her heart was racing. "Just for a minute." David led her a few steps away, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Do you know who he really is?" "What do you mean?" "Adrian Blackwood. Do you know what he does, what his family is?" Emma's pulse quickened. "He's in security." "He's the head of the Blackwood Syndicate," David said urgently. "Emma, the man you're engaged to controls half the territory between here and the Canadian border. Not businesses, territory. He's—" David struggled for words. "He's dangerous, Emma, really dangerous." Emma looked back at Adrian, who was watching them with those golden amber eyes. Even from across the room she could feel the pull of whatever existed between them. "And," she said finally, "and, Emma, you could get hurt. These aren't people you want to get involved with." "Funny," Emma replied, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "In 2 days with Adrian, I felt safer than I did in 3 years with you." David's face flushed. "That's different." "You're right. It is different. With Adrian, I don't have to wonder if I'm good enough. I don't have to earn basic respect. I don't have to flinch when someone raises their voice." Emma stepped closer to David, and he actually backed away. "Whatever you think you know about Adrian, you're wrong about one thing. He would never hurt me. Can you say the same?" Without waiting for an answer, Emma turned and walked back to Adrian, who immediately wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Ready to go?" he asked softly. "More than ready." As they walked toward the exit, Emma heard David call her name one more time. She paused at the door, looking back at the man who had once convinced her she was lucky to be tolerated. "See you tomorrow, David. Try not to lose any more sleep tonight." In the car, Adrian was quiet for several blocks before finally speaking. "What did he say to you?" "That you're dangerous, that I should be afraid of you." Emma turned to study his profile. "Are you going to tell me he's wrong?" Adrian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "No, he's not wrong about that." "Are you going to tell me I should be afraid?" "No." Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. "Because whatever else I am, Emma, whatever I'm capable of, I would tear my own heart out before I hurt you." Emma reached across the console, her fingers tracing the back of his hand. "Then that's all I need to know." They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, but Emma's mind was spinning. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow she would walk into that church on the arm of one of the most powerful men in the region. Tomorrow, everyone who had ever made her feel small would see exactly what she was worth. But more than that, tomorrow she would have to decide what came after. Because despite everything, the impossibility of their situation, the supernatural elements she was still processing, the dangerous world Adrian inhabited, Emma was falling for him, really falling. And the most terrifying part wasn't that he might be dangerous. It was that she was starting to hope he meant everything he'd said about forever. Emma stood before her bedroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. The midnight blue dress transformed her into someone elegant, confident, someone who could believably be marrying the Alpha King. Adrian's choosing had been perfect. Everything about her looked expensive, untouchable, worthy, if only she could convince herself. Her hands shook as she fastened the diamond earrings Adrian had insisted on buying. Today was David's wedding day. Today she would walk into that church and face everyone who had witnessed her humiliation, her perceived failure. Today she would pretend to be someone important enough to matter. The knock at her door came exactly when Adrian had promised. Emma opened it to find him standing in the hallway, and her breath caught in her throat. He wore a charcoal grey suit that emphasized his impossible height and broad shoulders, but it was his expression that made her pulse race. He looked at her like she was a queen preparing for her coronation. "You're breathtaking," he said simply, stepping into her apartment. His presence immediately filled the small space, making it feel intimate and charged. "I feel like I'm going to be sick," Emma admitted. Adrian moved toward her with that predatory grace, his amber eyes never leaving her face. "Tell me what you're afraid of." "Everything." The word escaped before Emma could stop it. "I'm afraid they'll see through us. I'm afraid they'll know this is all pretend. I'm afraid—" Her voice broke. "I'm afraid they're right about me, that I really am nobody special." Adrian's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Look at me, Emma." She met his golden gaze, seeing herself reflected there. "You are not nobody. You are not pretending to be worth something. You are worth everything. And anyone who made you believe otherwise is about to learn exactly how wrong they were." His voice dropped to something dark and commanding. "Today you walk in as my equal, my chosen, my mate. Let them try to diminish that." The certainty in his voice, the absolute conviction, made something settle in Emma's chest. When Adrian looked at her like this, she could almost believe she deserved the way he treated her. "Ready?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, letting him help her with her wrap. As they walked to his car, she noticed the way Adrian's hand settled possessively on the small of her back, the way he moved like he owned the world and was generously allowing others to share it. The drive to the church was quiet, but Emma could feel Adrian's attention like a physical touch. Every few minutes his hand would find hers, that golden warmth spreading up her arm and settling in her chest like courage. "Remember," he said as they pulled into the church parking lot, You belong here, with me. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. The church was stunning, all soaring arches and stained glass windows that caught the afternoon light. Cars worth more than Emma's annual salary lined the parking area, and she could see people in expensive clothing gathering near the entrance. David's crowd. People who moved in circles Emma had never been part of, who had always made her feel like an outsider looking in. But walking toward the church entrance with Adrian's arm around her, Emma felt different. Heads turned as they approached. Conversations paused. She could hear whispers following in their wake, but for the first time they didn't sound mocking. They sounded impressed, curious, respectful. "Emma?" A voice called from behind them, and Emma turned to see her sister Claire approaching with her husband Mark. Claire's eyes were wide as they took in Adrian's commanding presence. "Claire, Mark, this is my fiancé, Adrian Blackwood," Emma said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Adrian stepped forward with that natural confidence, extending his hand. "Pleasure to meet Emma's family." Claire shook his hand like she was greeting royalty, and Emma noticed how Mark straightened automatically, as if responding to some instinctive hierarchy. "We had no idea Emma was seeing anyone," Claire said, her voice carefully controlled. "This is quite a surprise." "The best ones usually are," Adrian replied smoothly. His arm tightened around Emma's waist. "I consider myself very fortunate." They made polite conversation for a few more minutes, but Emma could see Claire processing Adrian's obvious wealth, his natural authority, the way other guests were giving them space while clearly trying to eavesdrop. When they finally headed into the church, Claire pulled Emma aside. "Holy shit, Emma," she whispered urgently. "Who is he? He's gorgeous and clearly loaded, and he looks at you like you hung the moon." "It's complicated," Emma said, which was perhaps the understatement of the century. "Complicated how? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you hit the jackpot." Before Emma could respond, Adrian appeared at her elbow. "Ladies, I believe they're seating us." The church interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Flowers everywhere, soft lighting, the kind of elegant simplicity that cost a fortune. Emma recognised the guests filing into pews, David's law firm colleagues, Sarah's society friends, family members who had always treated Emma like a disappointing substitute for what David deserved. An usher approached them, clearly recognising that Adrian was someone important, despite not knowing exactly who. "Sir, we have reserved seating near the front if you prefer." "That's not necessary," Adrian said politely. "We'll sit wherever is convenient." But Emma noticed how they were led to seats with an excellent view, how other guests shifted to make room, how conversations quieted when Adrian passed. Whatever David had learned about Adrian last night had clearly spread through certain circles. Emma was just starting to relax when she spotted David near the altar, adjusting his tie with nervous fingers. Their eyes met across the crowded church, and Emma saw the moment he registered her presence. His face went pale, then flushed, his gaze moving from Emma to Adrian with unconcealed anxiety. "He looks terrified," Emma murmured. "Good," Adrian replied, his voice carrying an edge that made Emma shiver. "He should be." The ceremony began with all the pomp and circumstance Sarah had undoubtedly demanded. Emma tried to focus on the proceedings, but she found herself distracted by Adrian's presence beside her, the way his fingers traced patterns on the back of her hand, the golden warmth that seemed to pulse between them with every touch. When the pastor asked if anyone objected to the union, Emma felt Adrian tense beside her. For a wild moment she wondered if he was actually considering it, but he remained silent, though his grip on her hand tightened possessively. "You may kiss the bride," the pastor announced, and David and Sarah sealed their union with a kiss that looked more relieved than passionate. As the recessional music began and the wedding party filed out, Emma prepared herself for the real test, the reception. That's where the conversations would happen, where she'd have to face the people who had watched David leave her, who had whispered about her failures and inadequacies. "You're tensing up again," Adrian observed as they made their way to the reception venue. I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to figure out that this is all—" "What? All what?" Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her in the church parking lot. "Emma, what exactly do you think is fake here?" The question caught her off guard. "We barely know each other. This engagement, this relationship—" "I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. I know you read romance novels when you're stressed. I know you have a scar on your ribs from when someone you trusted hurt you, and that you still flinch sometimes when voices are raised." Adrian's hands framed her face. "I know you're brave and stubborn, and that you smell like vanilla and hope. I know you have gold flecks in your eyes that shine when you're happy, and that when I touch you, something in my chest recognizes something in yours." Emma's breath caught. "Adrian." "I know that 2 days ago I was existing, going through motions, waiting for something I couldn't name, and now I know what I was waiting for. You." His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "So tell me, Emma, what part of that feels fake to you?" Before Emma could respond, someone called her name from across the parking lot. They turned to see David approaching, having clearly escaped from his post-ceremony photo session. "Emma, I need to talk to you," he said urgently, barely glancing at Adrian. "Privately." "I don't think that's appropriate," Adrian replied smoothly, but Emma could hear the warning underneath. "It's about her safety," David insisted, his voice tight with fear. "There are things she needs to know." "David." Emma's voice was firmer than she felt. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my fiancé." David's eyes darted between them, clearly weighing his options. Finally he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Emma, the calls I've been getting, they're about him, about his family. Do you know what the Blackwood Syndicate really does, the territories they control?" "I know enough," Emma said, surprised by her own conviction. "You don't understand. My firm has been investigating them for months. Federal investigations, Emma. This isn't just some wealthy family. They're involved in things that could get you hurt, or worse." Adrian's entire body went rigid beside her. When Emma glanced at him, his eyes had shifted from amber to that dangerous gold, and his expression was utterly cold. "Careful, David," Adrian said softly, but his voice carried enough menace to make David step back instinctively. "I'm trying to help her," David protested, but Emma could see the fear in his eyes as he looked at Adrian. "No," Emma said quietly, "you're trying to control me, again, just like you did when we were together, making me doubt my judgment, my choices, my worth." She stepped closer to David, and this time he was the one who backed away. "You had your chance to protect me, David. You chose to throw glasses instead." David's face flushed red. "That was an accident." "Nothing about our relationship was an accident. You made me feel grateful for scraps of affection. You made me believe I should be thankful that anyone would put up with me." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "But Adrian makes me feel like I'm everything, so whatever you think you know about him, whatever warnings you think you need to give, save them for someone who cares what you think." "Emma, please!" "She said enough!" Adrian's voice cut across David's protest like a blade. "Your wedding reception is starting. I suggest you get back to your bride before people start wondering where the groom went." David opened his mouth to argue, but something in Adrian's expression made him think better of it. He looked at Emma one more time, his eyes holding a mixture of fear and something that might have been regret. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said quietly. "For the first time in my life I do," Emma replied. David nodded slowly, then turned and walked back toward the reception venue. Emma watched him go, feeling something she hadn't expected. Pity. He looked smaller somehow, less significant than she remembered. "Are you all right?" Adrian asked softly. Emma turned to look at him, taking in the sharp lines of his face, the golden eyes that saw everything, the careful way he was holding himself back from doing something violent to the man who had just threatened their relationship. "I will be," she said, "after we go in there and show everyone exactly what I'm worth." Adrian's smile was predatory. "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget." They walked toward the reception venue hand in hand, and Emma felt power radiating from Adrian like heat. Whatever happened next, whoever tried to diminish her or question her value, they would have to go through him first. And as they approached the entrance to what was sure to be the most important evening of her life, Emma realized that she wasn't pretending anymore. This wasn't fake. What she felt for Adrian, what she saw in his eyes when he looked at her, it was real. Terrifyingly, wonderfully, irrevocably real. The only question now was whether she was brave enough to embrace it. The reception venue was exactly what Emma had expected. Crystal chandeliers, flowing silk draping, and flowers that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Every surface gleamed with wealth and careful planning, the kind of elegant perfection that Sarah had always craved and David had always been able to provide. Emma's stomach clenched as they entered, but Adrian's hand on her back was steady, grounding. She could feel his power like a physical presence beside her, the way other guests seemed to unconsciously shift to give them space. "Breathe," he murmured against her ear, his voice like dark honey. "You belong here, remember that." The cocktail hour was already in full swing, conversations flowing as freely as the expensive champagne. Emma recognized most of the faces, David's law colleagues, Sarah's sorority sisters, family friends who had watched Emma's relationship implode with a mixture of pity and barely concealed satisfaction. But tonight was different. Tonight she wasn't the woman David had discarded. Tonight she was the woman who had captured the attention of Adrian Blackwood, and everyone could see it. "Emma," Sarah's voice cut through the ambient chatter, bright and false as her wedding smile. "You look absolutely stunning. Doesn't she look stunning, David?" David appeared at Sarah's side, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes holding that same fear Emma had seen in the parking lot. "Beautiful," he agreed, though his gaze kept sliding to Adrian with obvious nervousness. "And Adrian," Sarah continued, extending her hand with practiced charm. "Congratulations on your engagement. When did you propose?" "Last week," Adrian replied smoothly, taking Sarah's hand briefly. Emma noticed how Sarah's confident smile flickered when their skin made contact, how she pulled back faster than politeness required. How romantic, a whirlwind courtship. Sarah's laugh was just slightly too bright. Emma always was the impulsive type. "On the contrary," Adrian said, his amber eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "Emma is extraordinarily thoughtful. She considers every angle, weighs every option. When she chooses something or someone, it's because she knows exactly what she wants." The subtle correction landed like a slap. Sarah's smile became more strained, and Emma could see her struggling to maintain the gracious bride facade. "Of course, I just meant, well, we're all so surprised. Emma was always so quiet when she was with David. We hardly knew she existed half the time." The words hit exactly as they were intended to, designed to remind Emma of her place, to make her feel invisible again. Emma felt the familiar shame begin to rise, the old programming that told her to apologize, to make herself smaller. But then Adrian's arm tightened around her waist, and she felt that golden warmth spread through her chest like courage. "That says more about the company she was keeping than about Emma herself," Adrian replied, his voice carrying an edge that made David stiffen. "The right person brings out the best in their partner, makes them shine rather than disappear." Sarah's face flushed, but before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of more guests eager to meet the mysterious Adrian Blackwood. Emma found herself swept into conversations where she was introduced as Adrian's fiancée first, Emma second, a complete reversal of every social interaction she'd had in this crowd. "Your family's in shipping, isn't that right?" asked Harold Morrison, David's father, clearly fishing for information about Adrian's business. "Among other things," Adrian replied vaguely. "We have diverse interests." Emma noticed how Adrian deflected personal questions without seeming rude, how he managed to imply vast wealth and influence without actually claiming anything specific. But she also noticed the way conversations quieted when he approached, how servers appeared instantly when he needed anything, how even the most socially prominent guests seemed eager for his approval. "Excuse me," a voice said behind them, and Emma turned to see David approaching with 2 champagne flutes. "Emma, could I steal you for just a moment? There's something I need to say." Adrian's entire body went rigid. "I don't think—" "It's all right," Emma said quietly, though her heart was racing. "Just for a minute." David led her a few steps away to a relatively quiet corner near the windows overlooking the gardens. His expression was more serious than she'd ever seen it, and when he spoke his voice was urgent, almost desperate. "Emma, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. I've been getting calls from the FBI. Federal investigators have been watching the Blackwood family for months." Emma's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of investigations?" "Territory disputes, intimidation, worse." David stepped closer, his lawyer instincts clearly warring with genuine fear. "Emma, I've seen the files. Whatever Adrian's told you about his business, it's not the whole truth. The Blackwood Syndicate controls everything from here to the Canadian border through force and fear." "And?" David blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "And, Emma, you could be in serious danger. These aren't people you want to be associated with." "Funny," Emma said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "In 3 days with Adrian, I felt safer than I did in 3 years with you." "That's different. You're right. It is different." Emma stepped closer to David, and he actually backed away from her. "With Adrian, I don't have to wonder if I'm good enough. I don't have to earn basic kindness. I don't have to flinch when someone raises their voice." David's face flushed red. "I never meant—" "You never meant to hurt me. You never meant to make me feel worthless. You never meant to throw that glass." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "But you did all of those things, David. And now you want to save me from someone who actually treats me like I matter." "Emma, please." "No." The word came out with more force than Emma had ever managed before. "I'm done letting you tell me what's best for me. I'm done letting you make me feel grateful for scraps." David's expression shifted then, the mask of concern slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. "You think he actually cares about you? Look around, Emma. Look at this wedding, these people, this life. You think a man like Adrian Blackwood would choose someone like you if he wasn't getting something out of it?" The words landed like physical blows, striking at every insecurity Emma had ever harboured. For a moment, she was back to being the woman who had believed she was lucky to be tolerated, who had convinced herself that David's cruelty was somehow deserved. But then she remembered the way Adrian looked at her, the absolute certainty in his voice when he called her extraordinary, the patient way he waited for her to choose him rather than demanding it. "You're right," she said quietly, and David's face lit up with triumph. A man like Adrian Blackwood wouldn't choose just anyone. He'd choose someone worthy of him, someone who sees his value and matches it, someone who makes him better rather than smaller. Emma smiled, feeling power she'd never known she possessed. "Thank you for reminding me that he chose me." David's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You stupid little—" "Is there a problem here?" Adrian's voice cut across David's building rage like a blade. He appeared beside Emma with that predatory grace, and suddenly David looked very small and very afraid. "We were just—" David started. "Finishing our conversation," Emma interrupted smoothly. "David was just wishing us well in our engagement." Adrian's amber eyes moved between them, clearly reading the tension in the air. When his gaze settled on David, it was with the kind of lethal focus that made grown men reconsider their life choices. "How thoughtful," Adrian said softly. "I'm sure Emma appreciates your concern for her well-being." The words were polite, but something in Adrian's tone made David step back instinctively. Emma could see him warring with himself, clearly wanting to say more but equally clearly terrified of the consequences. Yes, well, David managed finally. I should get back to Sarah. It's my wedding day after all. Yes, Adrian agreed, his smile sharp as a blade. It is. Congratulations on that. David nodded jerkily and retreated toward the main reception area, leaving Emma alone with Adrian near the windows. The moment they were alone, Adrian's expression softened, his hands framing her face gently. "What did he say to you?" he asked quietly. "The same things he always said, that I'm not good enough, that I should be grateful anyone wants me, that you must be getting something out of this arrangement because no one would actually choose me for me." Emma's voice cracked slightly on the last words. Adrian's jaw tightened, and for a moment his eyes flashed that dangerous gold. "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that you did choose me, and that I choose you too." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, an intensity that made Emma's breath catch. "Emma! Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ's voice boomed over the reception, cutting through their moment. "If everyone could gather for the bride and groom's first dance." The crowd began to shift toward the dance floor, but Emma found herself reluctant to break the spell of Adrian's gaze. There was something in his eyes, something that looked like wonder and possession and promise all at once. "Sir, after this," he said quietly, his thumb tracing her cheekbone, "we need to talk, really talk, about what this means, about what you want." "I know what I want," Emma said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "And what's that?" "You," she said simply, "all of you. Not pretend, not fake, not for just one night. You." Adrian's smile was devastating. "Then you'll have me. For as long as you want me, Emma. Forever, if you'll let me." They moved toward the dance floor with the rest of the guests, but Emma felt like she was floating. David and Sarah swayed in the center of the room, the picture of a perfect couple, but Emma only had eyes for the man beside her. "Dance with me," Adrian said when the bride and groom's song ended and the floor opened to other couples. Emma let him lead her into the crowd of dancers, his arms coming around her with a possessiveness that felt both protective and claiming. As they moved together, she was acutely aware of how perfectly she fit against him, how right this felt. "Emma," Adrian said softly, his lips close to her ear, "there's something I need to tell you. About what David said, about the investigations." "I don't care," Emma interrupted. "You should care. You should know what you're getting into." Emma pulled back to meet his gaze, seeing uncertainty there for the first time since she'd known him. "Adrian, I don't care what you've done. I don't care what business you're in, or what territories you control, or what the FBI thinks they know about you. I care about how you make me feel. I care about the way you look at me like I'm precious. I care about the fact that in 3 days you've made me feel more valued than David did in 3 years. Emma?" "I love you," she said simply, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I know it's crazy and impossible and too fast, but I love you. Not because you're powerful or wealthy or dangerous, because you're you, because you saw something in me worth choosing." Adrian went completely still, his amber eyes searching her face. "Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Adrian Blackwood, whatever that means, whatever that costs, whatever comes next. I love you." Adrian's smile was blinding. "I love you too, Emma. More than I thought I was capable of, more than I knew was possible." His arms tightened around her. "You're my mate, my equal, my everything." And then he was kissing her, right there in the middle of David and Sarah's wedding reception, and Emma felt the world shift around them. This wasn't the gentle kiss of a fake boyfriend or the careful affection of a man playing a part. This was claiming and passion and promise all at once. When they broke apart, breathless and shining, Emma realized that everyone around them had stopped dancing to stare. But for once in her life, she didn't care who was watching. "Take me home," she whispered against Adrian's lips. "Which home?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Yours or mine?" Ours, Emma said, and knew with absolute certainty that she meant it. Take me to our home. Adrian's smile was perfect, predatory and tender at once. Forever? Forever. As they left the reception hand in hand, Emma caught sight of David standing near the bar, his expression unreadable as he watched them go. Sarah was nowhere to be seen, probably off fixing her makeup or managing some wedding crisis. Emma felt a flicker of something that might have been pity for the man she'd once thought she loved. He looked smaller somehow, less significant, like a chapter in her life that had already been closed and filed away. But that was yesterday's story. Tonight belonged to her and Adrian, to the impossible love that had bloomed between them, to the future they were choosing together, despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. Tonight, Emma Walsh was going home with the Alpha King, and tomorrow she would wake up as someone entirely new, someone worthy, someone chosen, someone loved beyond measure, someone who belonged. Emma had never seen anything like Adrian's mansion. The car wound through gates that opened automatically, past gardens that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale, up a circular drive that led to a house that could have housed 50 families comfortably. But it was the way Adrian's hand never left hers during the drive that made her feel like she was truly coming home. "This is where you live?" she asked as they pulled up to the front entrance, where soft lighting illuminated stone columns and architectural details that spoke of generations of wealth. "Where we live now," Adrian corrected gently, "if you want to." Before Emma could respond, the front doors opened and a woman appeared, middle-aged, elegantly dressed, with the kind of refined bearing that suggested she'd been managing important households her entire life. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," she said with a respectful bow. "Miss Emma, I'm Mrs. Chen, the house manager. We've been looking forward to meeting you." Emma blinked. "Your Majesty?" Adrian's hand tightened on hers. In shifter culture, pack leaders carry royal titles. It's traditional. To Mrs. Chen he added, "Has the lunar suite been prepared?" "Everything is ready, as you requested." Mrs. Chen's smile was warm as she looked at Emma. "We're honoured to serve our new Lunar Queen." Lunar Queen. The title hit Emma like a physical force. Not girlfriend, not even fiancée. Queen. As if Adrian had never doubted this moment would come. "This is overwhelming," Emma whispered as they walked through the front hall, past artwork that belonged in museums and furniture that probably cost more than her entire apartment. "We can take it slowly," Adrian said softly. "Whatever pace you need, Emma, there's no rush." A man appeared from a side corridor, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same predatory grace Emma had noticed in Adrian. But where Adrian felt safe, this man radiated barely controlled danger. "Marcus," Adrian said by way of greeting. "Emma, this is my beta, my second in command. Marcus, meet our Luna." Marcus studied Emma with intense dark eyes, and she had the distinct feeling she was being evaluated. Then his expression shifted to something that might have been approval, and he bowed deeply. "Lunar Queen," he said formally, "the pack has been waiting for you." "The pack?" Emma looked between Adrian and Marcus, her pulse quickening. "My inner circle," Adrian explained. "The wolves who help me manage pack business. They've been curious about you since yesterday." "Curious?" Marcus's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "Let's say word travels fast when the Alpha King finds his mate, especially when he announces it by attending a human wedding and claiming her publicly." Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. "People know about tonight." "People know you chose our king over your former attachment," Marcus said diplomatically. "That you declared yourself publicly as his mate. In our world, that's as binding as any ceremony." Emma turned to Adrian, who was watching her carefully. "Is that true?" "In shifter law, mutual declaration before witnesses creates a recognised mating bond," Adrian said quietly. "But in human law, we're still just engaged. Nothing has to change until you're ready." The thoughtfulness of that, The way he was giving her space to process while still claiming her in his world made Emma's chest tight with emotion. "I'd like to see our rooms," she said softly. "If that's all right." Adrian's smile was gentle. "Of course." He led her up a sweeping staircase and down a hallway lined with portraits. Generations of Blackwoods, Emma realized, studying the similar amber eyes and strong jawlines. At the end of the hall, Adrian opened double doors to reveal a suite that took her breath away. The bedroom was enormous, but somehow still intimate, with a fireplace crackling softly and windows that overlooked the moonlit gardens. Everything was elegant but warm, expensive but welcoming. "Your things from your apartment are being moved tomorrow," Adrian said, standing in the doorway as if he wasn't sure whether he was welcome in his own bedroom. "If you want them here, if you want to stay." Emma turned to look at him, this impossible man who ruled shapeshifters and commanded respect from everyone around him, but stood uncertainly in his own home because he was worried about her comfort. "I want to stay," she said simply. Adrian's relief was visible. "Are you sure? Emma, I know this is a lot. The house, the pack, the politics." "Adrian." She moved toward him, her hands settling on his chest. "Do you know what I was doing 3 days ago?" "What?" "Sitting alone in my tiny apartment, eating cereal for dinner, wondering if I was brave enough to go to David's wedding and face all the people who watched him leave me." Emma's hands moved up to frame Adrian's face. "Do you know what I'm doing now?" "Tell me." "Standing in a mansion with the man I love, being called a queen, surrounded by people who respect me because I matter to you." She smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. 3 days ago, I thought my life was over. Tonight, I feel like it's just beginning." Adrian's arms came around her then, holding her against him like she was precious beyond measure. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "More than I thought possible, more than I knew I was capable of." "Show me," Emma whispered. Adrian pulled back to study her face, his amber eyes searching. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." What followed was gentle and claiming at once, Adrian worshipping her like she was something sacred, while still marking her as unmistakably his. When Emma finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt complete for the first time in her life. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, and the scent of coffee drifting from somewhere nearby. For a moment, panic flared. This wasn't her apartment. This wasn't her bed. But then Adrian's arm tightened around her waist, and everything came flooding back. The wedding, the confrontation, the declaration of love, coming home. "Good morning." Adrian's voice was rough with sleep, his lips brushing against her shoulder. "Morning," Emma managed, still trying to process the luxury surrounding her. "Is this real?" "Very real." Adrian shifted so he could see her face. "Any regrets?" Emma considered the question seriously. Yesterday morning, she'd been Emma Walsh, nobody special, getting ready to face her ex-fiancé's wedding alone and humiliated. This morning, she was Emma Walsh, Lunar Queen, waking up in the arms of the most powerful shifter in the Northern Territories. "None," she said, and meant it absolutely. Adrian's smile was devastating. "Good, because I have something to show you." He led her to a balcony that overlooked the estate grounds, and Emma gasped. Rolling hills stretched to the horizon, dotted with smaller houses that were somehow clearly part of the larger property. People moved between the buildings, men and women who carried themselves with the same predatory grace she'd noticed in Adrian and Marcus. "Pack members," Adrian explained, following her gaze. "Families who've served mine for generations. They live here, work here, raise their children here. It's not just my territory, Emma. It's our community." "And they're all—" "Shifters, though we have human employees too, people who've earned our trust over the years." Adrian's hand settled on her waist. "Mrs. Chen, for instance. She's been with my family since I was a child." Emma leaned into his warmth, watching the people below go about their morning routines. It looked peaceful, domestic, like a small town where everyone knew everyone else. "What does a Lunar Queen actually do?" she asked. "Whatever she chooses," Adrian said immediately. "Some focus on pack welfare, settling disputes, organising community events. Others prefer to stay out of pack business entirely. There's no requirement beyond being my mate." "But you'd like me to be involved?" It wasn't a question. Emma could hear it in his voice, see it in the careful way he was watching the pack grounds. "I'd like you to find your place here," Adrian said honestly. "Whatever that looks like for you, whether that's leading pack functions or pursuing your own interests or something else entirely." Emma thought about her old job, the endless days in a cubicle where she'd felt invisible and undervalued. Then she looked at the community spread out below them, people who would see her as their queen, who would come to her for guidance and support. "I think I'd like to try," she said softly. "Being involved, I mean. Helping." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "Only if you want to. No pressure, no expectations. This is your choice, Emma. All of it." The days that followed passed like a dream. Emma moved her belongings to the mansion, though most of her furniture looked shabby and out of place in the elegant rooms. Adrian had gently suggested they could shop for new things together, and Emma found herself agreeing. She met pack members in small groups, letting Adrian introduce her gradually, rather than overwhelming her with dozens of new faces at once. They were unfailingly respectful, calling her Lunar Queen with genuine warmth, but Emma could see the curiosity in their eyes. Their king had found his mate, and they wanted to understand who she was. "You're handling this remarkably well," Marcus observed one afternoon, as Emma helped organise a community dinner in the main hall. "Most humans need months to adjust to pack dynamics." "Maybe I'm not most humans," Emma replied, surprising herself with the confidence in her voice. Marcus smiled, a rare expression on his usually serious face. "No, I don't think you are." The community dinner was Emma's first real test as Lunar Queen. Nearly 100 pack members gathered in the great hall, families with children, elderly couples, young adults who worked in the various pack businesses. Emma had spent days planning the menu with Mrs. Chen, wanting everything to be perfect. "Nervous?" Adrian asked as they prepared to join the gathering. "Terrified," Emma admitted. "What if they don't like me? What if I'm not what they expected in a Lunar Queen?" "Emma," Adrian cupped her face gently. "Look at me. You organised this entire event in less than a week. You remembered the dietary restrictions of pack members you'd met once. You've spent hours talking to the children, learning their names and interests. If that's not what a Lunar Queen should be, then I've been wrong about leadership my entire life." Emma looked into his amber eyes and saw absolute conviction. Not just love, but respect, admiration, the kind of faith that made her stand straighter and lift her chin. "Ready?" she asked. "Always with you." They entered the hall together, and conversation gradually quieted as pack members noticed their arrival. Emma felt dozens of eyes on her, evaluating, judging, deciding whether she was worthy of their loyalty. Then a little girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark curls and bright eyes, broke away from her parents and ran toward them. "Lunar Queen Emma!" she called out, throwing her arms around Emma's legs. "I drew you a picture." Emma knelt down to accept the crayon drawing, a somewhat abstract representation of what might have been herself and Adrian standing in front of the mansion. "It's beautiful, Sophie. Thank you." "Are you going to live here forever now?" Sophie asked with the directness of children. "I hope so," Emma said, and realised she meant it completely. "Good," Sophie announced loudly enough for half the hall to hear. "Alpha King was sad before you came. Now he smiles all the time." Laughter rippled through the gathered pack, warm and accepting, and Emma felt the last of her nervousness fade away. These people weren't judging her. They were welcoming her home. The dinner was a success by any measure. Emma found herself moving easily between conversations, learning about pack businesses and family dynamics, settling minor disputes with a tact she hadn't known she possessed. By the end of the evening, she felt like she'd found her place in a way she never had in her old life. "How do you feel?" Adrian asked as they walked home through the gardens, the mansion glowing with warm light ahead of them. "Like myself," Emma said, then laughed at how inadequate that sounded. "I mean, like the best version of myself, like who I was always meant to be." "Lunar Queen Emma," Adrian said softly, testing the title. "Is that really who I am now?" "If you want to be." Adrian stopped walking, turning to face her under the moonlight. "Emma, there's something I want to ask you." Emma's heart skipped. "What?" "The pack laws recognise our mating bond because we declared ourselves publicly, but human law—" Adrian reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Emma Walsh, will you marry me? Really marry me? Not fake, not pretend, not for anyone else? Will you marry me because you love me and want to spend forever as my queen?" Emma stared at the ring, a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless and perfect. But more than the ring, she stared at Adrian's face, at the vulnerability there, the hope mixed with fear. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, absolutely yes." Adrian's smile was blinding as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been made for her hand specifically. "When?" Emma asked, admiring the way the sapphire caught the moonlight. "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I'll wait however long you need to plan the wedding of your dreams." Emma thought about that, about the elaborate ceremony she'd once planned with David, all the details and stress and performance anxiety. Then she looked at the man in front of her, the life they were building together, the community that had already accepted her as family. "Actually," she said slowly, "I think I already had the wedding of my dreams. 3 days ago, at someone else's wedding, when you claimed me in front of everyone who ever made me feel small." Emma smiled, feeling lighter than air. "What I want now is the marriage, the life, the forever." "Just the forever?" Adrian's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Just the forever," Emma confirmed. "Is that enough for you?" "Emma Walsh," Adrian said, pulling her close. "Forever with you isn't nearly enough, but it's a good start." As they walked toward their home, their real home, their forever home, Emma thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She'd gone from nobody to everything, from invisible to queen, from broken to whole. But more than that, she'd gone from surviving to living, really living. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear your thoughts about Emma and Adrian's story in the comments. If you'd like to support me and help more people discover these stories, please subscribe. It's free and it means everything to me. Thank you for taking this journey with Emma as she found her way from heartbreak to happily ever after with her Alpha King.